It's about getting into schools and talking to young people because, you know, I know that people can change. And it's about talking to people and getting them to understand and perhaps step back from violence and prejudice and whatever. And we just need to work together and keep on the good fight there.
Absolutely. Hey there, guys. We are ecstatically happy to announce that we are associated with the Sophie Lancaster Foundation.
The times are changing, and with the unfortunate death of Sophie, those changes have made a massive impact for the future. If Sophie was with us still today, I can guarantee what you are doing will still be reaching so many lives of young teenagers, young adults, and those who wish to be as different as possible. So thank you very much.
To find out more about this incredible foundation and all the work they do, and more importantly, how you can help, head on over to www.sophielancasterfoundation.com.
This is Mick Strawn. I'm a production designer. I've been around forever. I design effects and all kinds of stuff. And you're listening to the Chronicles podcast.
Well, black coat, white shoes, black hat, Cadillac, yeah. He runs Time Bomb with my ass, boys. Welcome to hashtag WBW Way Back Wednesday. And these are the Chronicles of Steve Tanner. Why Tanner this week, Jamie?
I'll tell you that in a minute. First off, bravo.
Thank you, sir.
Bravo. That was very, very clever. But why Steve Tanner this week, you ask? Well, we don't need a reason. Quite frankly, we really liked this interview, so we're going to give it to you in one of the final Way Back Wednesdays, baby.
I can't believe we're almost done. It's a bit weird.
It's very weird.
It's like, what we're going to do for Wednesday now? You know, in a couple of weeks, we're finished. So it's like, Jamie. But yes, this interview is from all the way back in July of 2020, and it's just an absolute belter. We talked to Steve. Obviously, he runs Time Bomb Comics in Birmingham, so hence the Rancid reference there. I thought it would be very appreciated. And if you say Birmingham, Jamie comes. So, you know, pretty much it's just how it works around here. But yeah, so we talk about Steve and how he created Time Bomb, you know, all the publishing they do there, all about the shop, the comic. It's amazing. It's one of those interviews where you go, you just need to listen to it for yourself. There is now absolutely no video left. Nope. Every Way Back now will be audio only, but it will be available on YouTube. But it's be those weird wavelengthy things when you speak.
Yeah, pretty much. But no, this is an awesome conversation. Steve, as Tom just said, runs Time Bomb Comics, independent comic publisher based out of Birmingham, baby. But what I love about the fact is he's not just used this to release his own books, he's given other people a platform. Like if you go on the Time Bomb website, you can submit your own comic books. And if they like it, they'll help you and publish it, which I think is absolutely amazing in a world where anyone, especially as comics is such a big thing in the world now, people go like, I want to try and do this. It's a great helping hand to people. But Steve himself is currently releasing book 6 of his Flintlock series. It's currently in Kickstarter. It's almost done, I believe. I think it's hit all of its goals and it's just looking for stretch goals now. These books, he really sells them to you in this. Like, they sound amazing. They're set in the 18th century, featuring highwaymen, pirates, all that sort of stuff. There ain't no superheroes around here. It's nice history comic books. It's pretty damn cool.
Wonderful. But yeah, this is just the one that you're going to have to listen to, enjoy, and just check out. And this is one that I certainly don't remember too much of, so I'm going to look forward to listening back to this. It's going to be a belter. Jamie!
Yes, sir.
Any final words?
Thank you very much, Steve. It was great to actually meet you not long ago at the Comic-Con, although I'm not 100% convinced you remembered me. But it's fine. I'll let you off, sir. It was great to meet you. Thank you so much. Good luck with Flintlock. I hope he absolutely smashes it with his Kickstarter goals. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Steve, thank you for taking the time out to talk to us. So we really did enjoy it thoroughly. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the Chronicles of Steve Tanner.
So, I'm Tom, by the way. Lovely to meet you. I know that we can't see each other, but it's been a pleasure to have you on here. So thank you very much for joining us. How's lockdown been treating you?
Oh, for the most part, it's been pretty much, I guess, business as usual, because I most of the time I'm working from home anyway. So the only real difference is not being able to kind of go out so much. And I guess the big impact for me has been all the shows and all the conventions stopping, because that's obviously one of the main ways which I kind of interact with members of the public and promote my books, all that kind of stuff. So that's been the only real noticeable difference. The actual kind of being in the four walls, that hasn't been too bad. It's just a very strange and surreal year we're living through, isn't it? And it gets even weirder. I mean, I saw a couple of hours ago that Kanye West is now announced he's going to be president of America. So 2020 is still full of a lot of surprises, it seems.
It's just meant, welcome to level 7 of Jumanji. I don't understand what's going on, to be honest with you. It's been crazy, and you almost don't want to see what August, September and the rest have to offer, to be honest with you. The world stopped and just went absolutely mental. So I'd rather Rock go for president, to be honest.
Yeah, I was thinking who could they possibly get to do a worse job than the current guy, and here he comes.
The funny thing is, he'll probably get in.
Could you imagine like the presidential debates between those two? Though, it'd be absolutely amazing, wouldn't it?
Wow.
Well, anyway, as I probably should introduce yourself to the audience. Welcome to Superhero Bar Fight, Mr. Steve Tanner. So,
thank you. Nice to be on here.
Well, what I like to do is instead of me tell everyone what you do, why you're here, why you're on the show, and everything, please just introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do, etc.
Okay. Well, I'm Steve, and I been involved in comics for a long, long time. But I'm probably best known for Time Bomb Comics, which started up in September 2007 and has been going since then. Time Bomb Comics was pretty much set up originally as a vehicle to kind of promote some of my own work, but it's evolved into something now which, as well as featuring my work, regularly features the works of other artists, writers and creators. I'm based in Birmingham, and the reason I kind of did Time Bomb Comics in the first place, because I went to a convention in Birmingham in 2006, and I came away kind of determined to kind of to be behind a table and doing my own comics like I'd seen other people do there. So 1 year later, that's where I was. I was at the a 2007 show also in Birmingham. It was the first Vix show, I think, and since then it's grown from there. So currently, I'm probably best known creatively for doing the Flintlock ongoing anthology series, all set in the 18th century, and also kind of other kind of books which have that kind of historical adventure slant, but also books like Brawler, Bomb Scares, and just generally being a face on the convention circuit when the convention circuit is actually up and running.
Wonderful. How's that for an intro, ladies and gents? So you say you're from Birmingham. Obviously, myself, I'm a fellow Brummie. Whereabouts in Birmingham are you from?
Well, I've lived in Birmingham now about coming up for 10 years, I think. So I live in Smethwick, which is northwest Birmingham.
My condolences.
But before then, I was in Leicester for a couple of years. Previous to that, I've spent a few years working abroad as well. I spent 5 years working in India, 7 years in Germany, a year in Thailand, and all kinds of places. But in all through those kind of places I've been, the one constant has been my fascination and love of comics.
That's amazing. What? Sorry, carry on, Tom.
No, that's right. I was probably asking the same question, but what took you to India and all this? Was that with work or was it travelling or what?
Yeah, it was work. I mean, I grew up in South Wales. I was born in Cardiff, but then most of my kind of certainly my teenage years and into my early 20s before I started travelling, I was in a little village which is a small town really now, I think, which was just down the road from Barry, which most people know from Gavin and Stacey. So just along from there really. And it was, I mean, at the time, I was starting to kind of create comics, write comics, because I'm a writer, I'm not an artist. So that's where I really started kind of getting stuck into trying to write my own comics and starting to develop scripts and characters. And it was back then when I had my first kind of professional work published, which was a short story in a monthly called Crisis, which was published by Fleetway back in the 90s. I think it was late 80s it came out, I think. And I just signed up another short kind of one shot that was eventually published by Atomica in the US. And then I had an opportunity then to kind of go and work in Germany because I was working alongside the RAF at the time, and I had to make a decision whether to go across to Germany and work there, or just kind of hang about and try carrying on breaking into comics. And it was just instinct, really. I thought, well, actually, I can go to Germany and I can still try and do the comic stuff. As it happened, I went across to Germany, and shortly thereafter, I think there was comics industry kind of had one of its bubbles bursting, and there was a big kind of implosion. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think I probably made the right decision at the time. But I said I'd always followed comics all the way throughout, but then I hadn't actually created any comics myself then for many years. I mean, this would have been back in 1991 when I went to Germany, and then I went to the convention in 2006. So I had that big gap where I wasn't actually doing anything creatively, but I was still very much a comics fan. So it was great to get back into it in the end. It was like putting on a really comfortable pair of slippers, and you kind of think, why have I left them at the back of the cupboard for so long when they're so comfortable? So it was a bit like that, really. So I kind of I started off with kind of limited success, and then I kind of went off and did something else, and then came back and tried to do it all again.
That is awesome, and that was the question I was going to ask Tom. Well done.
Yeah, that's what I can read your mind.
You don't want to do that. Where did your passion and love for comics come from? Is it something from childhood, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it's kind of, you know, I'm of a certain age, I guess. You know, I'm in my 50s now, so I am one of the old boys on the circuit, as they say. I was described as a veteran in some kind of thing last year, and that really made me feel my age. But but I mean, when I was growing up, it was weekly comics were just a standard thing. There was just a plethora of weekly comics that were available at the newsagents, not just kind of one or two, not just things that's in plastic bags with toy tat on them. Just got loads and loads, dozens and dozens of different comics, and it was growing up in that environment where you'd always have a comic to read. And these weren't American comics; these were the classic British comics, you know, and this was in the time before 2000 AD came along. So it was all the things like, you know, Tiger and Battle and Action, Victor, and then the humor comics, you know, Monster Fun and, you know, the Buster and Whoopi, all those kind of things. I think it's just something which I always then had a comic to read. And then I remember walking into a newsagent's, and this would have been in 1979. I saw there was a Spider-Man comic on the shelf, and it was issue 311 of Spider-Man, the weekly Spider-Man comic. And that was the first one which Des Skin had taken over Marvel UK with trying to like revamp it. So he did this thing called the Marvel Revolution, where he kept basically revamped all the weekly titles. And that was one of the first ones that he did. He did Spider-Man Weekly, and then he did Marvel, the Marvel comic, the weekly Marvel comic as well. And I remember buying those and just really that was it really. I mean, I kind of followed things like 2000 AD off and on, and Star-Lord, but it was that Marvel Weekly which really then just seemed to kind of grab my attention. And at the time, I mean, what he'd done in retrospect, he just hacked down all these American comics, and he shortened all the artwork. So he'd crammed about nine or 10 different American monthlies into a weekly comic. But each issue took ages to read because, he just filled it up with content. And then, of course, at the same time, he was doing all that hucksterism thing, which, of course, Stan Lee used to do, by, come and join the Marvel Revolution, having the Says Des weekly columns, that kind of stuff. And I guess I was at that age where, I was I think 11, and I was just sucking into the whole thing. And over the next just few years, then I was pretty much hoovering up everything that Marvel UK put out. And that led then into discovering more of the American comics, and then from that discovering then comics fandom, and then it's like crack cocaine, isn't it? It really is. You kind of start off on the light stuff, and then before you know it, you're mainlining in the British indie press, small press black and white comics. So, and that's it. It's never gone away. And at the time, there was like, I knew a couple of people who were also into comics, but they kind of drifted away. But I just stuck with it through, and they've just it's always been a constant now. In many ways, you kind of, I know it's very common for people to hear like a familiar song, and it places you in a particular place. Or I have the same kind of thing with issues of comics. So particular comic issues, I will remember where I was or what I was doing at that time. And comics have become such a part of my life, such a huge part of my life, in so many ways. Transformative describes it too lightly, really. It's just given me a passion for the whole medium, the history of comics, the content of comics, the appreciation of comics. That's never gone away. And the people I've met through comics have been wonderful. I've made some really, really great friends through comics, and long may it continue.
That was amazing. That was wonderful. I love the names of the old British comics, like Action, Battle, and things like that. Just brilliant names. And you're saying met people. I know one of the people that we work with on this channel, Shane Chebsey.
Yes, I've known Shane for many years. In fact, I think it was Shane who was one of the organisers of that convention I went to that I decided to kind of go and do something myself. I think he was part of the organising team for that. I certainly know he was part of the Birmingham International Comic Show, which I think that first show evolved into for a couple of years. And of course, he does ICE now as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. That was awesome. So, bringing us forward to 2006, did you say it was 2007 with Time Bomb Comics?
Yeah.
So, where did the idea to start your own comic publishing company come from? Especially like this unique approach of doing one shots and stuff.
It was literally going to that convention, because I mean I'd been to conventions in the UK before. I mean, until I went abroad, I used to regularly go to the annual UK Comic Art Convention in London, which is that kind of, the annual mecca, which everyone used to go to. And for a couple of years after I went to Germany, I flew back to a couple of conventions, those annual conventions as well. But then they kind of stopped. Conventions, I think the conventions had kind of stopped in the UK, and then by the time they started up again, I think I was over in Asia, so far too far away really to kind of be part of it. So I'd come be back in the UK for not long, a couple of years perhaps, maybe not even that long, and I saw this convention advertised in Birmingham, and I was living in Leicester. So I thought, I haven't been one of those for years. It's not too far away. Let's go. So I went along, and the thing that struck me was that when I was at the conventions before, in the 80s and the early 90s, there was very much an obvious demarcation between the pros and the kind of the indie creators. And you could tell from you picked up one of the comics, you could tell from the format, the way it looked, the way it was printed, that it was definitely kind of like a small print run, almost like that fanzine, strip zine type feel, which was nothing wrong with that, because I remember buying loads of those and I used to really enjoy them. But suddenly I was in this environment where there was all these comics and they could just stand head and shoulders alongside anything that you would see in your local comic shop. So, the print quality was just brilliant. The content was outstanding. They were amazing things. And I just bought an armloads of this stuff. I was only there for a couple of hours, but I spent a fortune on. I just came away with just this massive pile of all these indie books from people like Accent UK were there, and Andy Winter was there, and Jason Cobley was there, I think, with his Bulldog stuff, and these were people, none of them I knew at the time. I know them all now, but at the time I didn't knew none of these guys were. But I thought that the stuff they were producing just blew me away, and it was just. And it was that kind of moment. You have that Damascus moment, and that was it. Power. It was like, I thought, right, I need to get back into this because I want to be doing this. And it was coming. I remember coming away from that show, walking away with a determination that I was going to spend the next year putting something together. So I'd be back at that same show, but this time when I went back, I would be the other side of the table, and I was selling my book. And that's what I did. So I spent that, spent then the next few months pulling that together. And that was the first one shot, which I did, called Ragamuffins, which is a little black and white comic, which was, beautifully printed. The printing was lovely. Everything else about it was dreadful, but the actually was printed lovely. It really was. It was, and I was there. I was there sat at the table selling it, and it was a great thing to do. And the whole thing was a learning experience. It really was. But that was really what was the spark. And but the actual first comic, it was dreadful. Really was bad. But it was printed lovely. And that was the spark really. That's what set it off. But the nice thing about it, that even then, even though there was this, I turned up with this comic that looked really nice on the outside, but horrific when you opened the cover up. The people that I met at that show, the people either side at me, at the tails either side, and the people who were walking around were so engaged and just interested and supportive. And I think that was the thing as well. And that's been the one constant as well. There has been that whole sense of community, and that's never changed in the entire time that I've been involved with Time Bomb. so it's great to actually be part of that community. And also you have that kind of cyclical effect, because obviously, everyone starts somewhere. Everyone does that show. If you're a creator and you actually put a comic together, you'll always have that moment where you're sat behind the table for the first time. And what's been great over the years that I've found myself at shows next to people who basically were doing what I did. They're there the first time. So it's been great to kind of engage with them and kind of support them and be interested in what they're doing in the same way that people were interested in what I'm doing. And I think that's one of the great things about indie comics, because it's an interesting medium, really, because certainly if I was a novelist, I know that even today, that this whole thing with novelists, that if they self-producing their own novels, it's seen as some kind of vanity press thing, and the mainstream publishers kind of peered down their noses in a bit of disgust at these wannabe novelists putting out their own work. The complete opposite has always been the way with comics. Now, whether it's from people like Dave Sim, who did Cerebus, and even people like Will Eisner, who did their own graphic novels before them. But there's been this wonderful thing with comics that if someone comes in and does it themselves, it's not seen as a bad thing. It's seen as a really cool, great thing to do, and it's almost aspirational. And I think there's that kind of sense with comics as well, which is so it makes it really a great community to be a part of, I think.
Wow, I mean, I love the fact that you've got that whole family feel with that, and that everyone supports everybody else. I think that's absolutely amazing, because I think that's rare to find these days in any industry. So what drew you? So is it the artwork? Is it just the fact that there's superheroes in it, or story based? Like, what drew with comics? What makes you go, oh, I'd really like to read that, or I'd really like to read this?
Well, I think it's like anyone else. My kind of taste has probably evolved a bit over the years. Anyway, I mean, for many years, I was a real kind of avid kind of superhero fan, DC Comics, Marvel Comics, like a lot of people, I think. But I was always, I was quite lucky, because just as I was starting to get into comics in my mid-teens, kind of where you transition from the weekly comics then to going into something a little bit more harder and starting to read the US titles. It just happened to coincide with things like Frank Miller's Dark Knight, and then Alan Moore arriving in. So I was lucky to kind of grow up in my teen, certainly my mid to late teens, through these years where all this great stuff was coming out, for the first time, which is really redefining how comics could be. So I think from that point, it was very much being aware of how important a story was, the comics, rather than just the art. Yeah. And it was I think it was the first time seeing that a comics writer could be elevated to the same level of praise, and even more so perhaps than the artists. Because before then, it was pretty much all about the artists. It was the artists that really kind of drove all the fan interest. And suddenly we were entering an environment where it was more it was more writers were coming into the fold as well, and it became more about the whole creator kind of package. So I kind of followed. I tended to follow writers more than anything else, I think, rather than artists. So I pretty much I followed all the stuff that Alan Moore did, and then people like Grant Morrison, and then. I'm trying to think of some of the others that I used to. Oh, Garth Ennis, of course. So Garth Ennis, I think some of the stuff that Garth was doing, and over the years how his style has changed. That he went from stuff which was a little bit kind of, he'd done stuff like Judge Dredd, that kind of stuff, but he's now doing war stories in the same vein as that Battle used to do, but with a bit of a more of a modern sensibility. So as I've continued to read comics, I think I'll be more aware of some of the other things that are out there beyond superheroes. I think for me, it's now very much story driven, and I kind of think back to the comics I used to enjoy before I became a true believer Marvelite at age 11, and it was stuff like, it was historical adventure stuff that I remember I used to really like reading, and that's the kind of stuff that I've kind of ended up gravitating towards myself, both creatively but also stuff I like to read. So if it's a historical story, or it's that kind of genre, I'll pick it up and I'll have a read of it. I tend to read very few superhero comics these days, straightforward superhero comics, very few. The majority of stuff I read now is indie stuff. And to me, that's probably a lot of that is probably because I'm involved with British indie comics. So I tend to see a lot more of the British indie comics and have a more awareness of what creators are doing in that community, and of course I know a lot of them. So, and it's always nice then to see what your mates are doing, and to support some of the comics they put out. So most of the comics I get these days are not from the comic shop. It's through things like Kickstarter, because I get a lot of my comics now through Kickstarter, and I think, and again, it's a very varied and very wide range of stuff I get. But I also like things like these days the European comics. So I'm a great fan of Citybook, who do the English reprints of classic European comic series. So things like Thorgal and Largo Winch. And things like that. So I really like those kind of things too. But what drives it all is really, for me, the story. It's got to be a great story. Yes, of course, it needs to be drawn nicely as well. But if it's just nice art and there's nothing to it, it's a very hollow reading experience, and I tend not to enjoy it then.
Cool.
With Time Bomb, do you just release your own books, or do you work with other writers and help publish their work as well?
Oh, it's a combination. I mean, at the moment, we're moving to. Over the next couple of years, the release schedule will be probably 70% will be other writers and artists, and 30% will be written by me, and that was always the intent, that it would. I said it was originally just as something that would showcase my own work, but then slowly been able to kind of showcase others. So it with time, I was very much it's not the Steve Tanner show. It really is a means to get other creators out there, and the stuff that I publish. If it's other creators' work, it's stuff which I really like, and that's really the only tick box exercise. So if something comes my way and I think, oh yeah, this is great, I'd like to publish it, then I will. I mean, a good example of that was a book called Defiant, which came out a couple of years ago, which is written by Andy Winter, which is a Viking story, and it's based on true events of the Viking Battle of Maldon that took place in Essex, where the Anglo-Saxons went up against the Vikings, and it's a brilliant story. It really is, and so I was more than happy to put that out, and. So, and with the anthology books in particular, that's a huge, a full kind of cornucopia of different writers and artists. And again, it's great to be able to do something which can get their work out there as well. So it's certainly not just my work. One of the nicest things is being able to kind of work with other writers and artists, creators, and help them get their work out there as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you've mentioned the ongoing series that you're doing at the moment, Flintlock. Yeah. So what's that book about?
That's again, it's historical adventures, but it's all set in the 18th century. So all the stuff. It's an anthology book. So in each the Flintlock books, there's going to be at least 3 different stories, and each story is set in a different decade in the 18th century. So they're all kind of standalone stories, but it's all within a shared timeline. So you can have a story that's set in 1725 having an impact on a story that's set in 1785, even though the characters in the stories may not actually encounter each other. I mean, one or two of them do cross over, but otherwise they kind of they chug along in their own little settings in their own little decades. But it's all part of a bigger patchwork, I suppose. And really, the idea behind Flintlock was just kind of to scratch a few personal itches, really, because I mentioned Ragamuffins, which is the first book that Time Bomb did, but the second one I put out was called Dick Turpin and the Restless Dead, which was as it says on the tin, really, Dick Turpin the highwayman fighting zombies. And it was. I mean, and the idea was that, because Ragamuffins was this kind of, science fiction, time travel kind of dense kind of story. And I wanted to do something then which was completely different from that, rather than just rather be some one trick pony. And at the time, this would have been in 2007. And there, if you remember, there was a big zombie craze in comics that lasted a couple of years. Yeah. And I remember sitting down and it was one of those conversations that started out as just a bit of a laugh. They were saying, "Oh yeah, everyone's doing zombies now. We should do." We kind of all these crazy kind of think of some versus zombies, milkmen fighting zombies, spacemen fighting zombies, and then I think I said highwaymen fighting zombies, and it was literally I paused. Like, oh yeah, actually that's a really cool idea. So that's what we did. So the second release was Dick Turpin fighting zombies, Dick Turpin the Restless Dead, but that really made a difference because that got far more attention than our first book. I think partially because it was a much, much more accomplished piece than that first one. That first, the Ragamuffins was where, it was the learning experience. Dick Turpin was where, you'd taken the stuff that you'd learned and you started applying it. But as part of that, I did some research on the real Dick Turpin, which I found completely fascinating. But at the same time, that research just opened up this kind of mad interest in the 18th century. And to the point where, it turned me into an 18th century obsessive. I am nuts about the period now. I think it's brilliant. And it was then kind of thinking a few years later, right, I need to do something. What do I want to do? And I wanted to do, I thought, well, actually, I want to do something with set in the 18th century because that's what I'm really excited about. So that's where Flintlock came from. And it was one of those things, because you mentioned about if Time Bomb was just for my work. But I mean, Flintlock came in part because after, I think I'd written the first few books for Time Bomb until about 2011, and then from that point on, for the next 3 years, the only stuff we put out was written by other people. I hadn't written anything. I was just publishing other people's work. And I was at a convention in London. I think it was one of the Supercons, and Jasper Bark. I don't know if you know Jasper, but he's a horror writer. He. I'd known him for a couple of years, and he took me to one side, and he kind of gave me a bit of a talking to, and basically said, "Why have you stopped writing stuff? Why are you not, writing comics anymore?" And he was very friendly about it, but it was a bit of a kick up the arse. And I thought, actually, yeah, he's right. I should really, because I do enjoy it. So it was that moment I thought, actually, yeah, I'll do something else. And I thought, I need to do something in the 18th century. And then the final piece of that puzzle was also at that same show, where I was wandering around, and they had one of these big American publishers over that only publish all this tits and ass comics. Is the best way to describe them. Yeah, they're awful stuff. Yeah, nicely drawn, but just dreadful. And I
don't think people are buying them for the stories, to be fair.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Well, it can't be for the features about cars because there's no features in them. But as part of this, they had this big, massive display, and they had all these slabbed comics, which they were selling, and which are their variant covers. So, and they were selling for £20 a pop, and there was this one variant cover, and literally all it was a close up of this comic character's arse, and it was just these like pink globes, and that's it. That's all it was. And it was like there was nothing else, and people were buying them at £20 a pop. And I thought, oh, this is really bad. And I kind of suddenly realised, well, actually, yeah, this is just the way that women are portrayed in comics is a bit rubbish, really. So it'd be nice to do something which I try to kind of push against that a bit, not in a kind of preachy way, but just kind of harkening back to, the historical adventure comics. And of course, although I when I was 8, 9, 10, whatever, I'd be reading Battle and all that kind of stuff. There was loads of girls' weeklies as well, who always featured these historical adventure characters and really strong female characters. So it was a case of, actually, so I could do something with proper female characters rather than just women with their tits out, which is what a lot of the kind of the way that comics seem to be presenting women a lot of the time. So I thought, well, I could combine those. I could combine the 18th century, and I could have female leads rather than male leads. So that was really how it came together. So the idea was that with Flintlock, excuse me, most of the lead characters are female, but they act like women actually do, rather than how maybe a 13-year-old thinks women might act. And so they behave in a certain way that's actually on point for the period, but they're still kind of strong characters in their own right. So even the way the characters are presented, you'll never see Lady Flintlock, who's the highwayman, sat there in a corset, or with cleavage hanging out, because women wouldn't have dressed like that in the 18th century. Unless they were a prostitute, of course. But it's trying to have that kind of I don't know, just pushing something back and just putting something in place, which I thought, I'm sure if I do something which isn't quite just blokey, it could appeal to a wider audience as well. And what's been the nice thing about it, because just before the first book was released, you have that kind of nervousness. So have I, am I doing something which is just purely like only I'm going to be interested in, no one else is, But what's been the nice thing about Flintlock is that it's built up a really strong female audience of readers, to the point I think about 60% of the readership is female. And the nice thing about that is that it wasn't designed to appeal to women. It was just designed to appeal to comics readers who want to read some good stories. And the support I've had from female readers who just really like the fact that the characters are presented, and they are these strong female archetypes, without kind of resorting to the TNA nonsense. That's been a really good. It's been a great response to it. So, Flintlock has gone from strength to strength on that. Really, I've just finished writing all the scripts for book 5, and they're all with the artists now. So Flintlock has been a real great journey for me, and it's led to other things as well, which is always a great thing.
That's amazing,
incredible.
And I love how, like, when you're telling us about that, listening to earlier parts of the conversation, like, you can hear where that affected this project and like different parts in your life that you've told us about, if that makes sense. Yes, very, very much so. I mean, I think, things always, I think that's the thing. It's one big, it's always, I mean, it's a cliche, the word journey, but it is like one big journey. And there's so many things that where you think, actually, that made a difference. But certainly as a creator, you should always be kind of evolving and changing and
and moving forward, I think, and that's a very important part of the whole creative process. I think learning from what you've done before, using your own interests and your own experiences, building on those. I think that's such a key part of being a creator in any medium, not just comics.
That's amazing. I genuinely love that, and I love the fact that you've drawn in this female audience who are attaching themselves to the character, because I remember reading something quite a while ago, and it was talking about when Marvel made Miles Morales Spider-Man. Yeah. And they gained a lot of young black kids reading and finding inspiration and absolutely loving this story because they saw themselves represented on the page, which didn't really happen very often. And it's awesome that you've put that out there in the indie comic world for females to have that representation, because let's be honest, as you said, there isn't much. So it's really awesome that you've sort of championed that.
Well, and the thing is, it's kind of that's like a byproduct. That's the thing, you see. That there's never you should. I think it's never about starting to do it from a kind of social justice warrior perspective. It's doing something because it kind of engages with you creatively. You think it'd be a really good idea, and then you hope other people will also think it's a great idea too. And it just sees something as well that because a lot of the 17th century kind of key kind of types of figures are figures that we're very familiar with. We're familiar with highwaymen. We're familiar with pirates. We're familiar with samurai, but very often they are presented as male characters. But historically, you would have female characters as well in those roles, and I think that's one of the key things with Flintlock as well, that it is kind of it crosses over occasionally into kind of steampunkish territory, but for the most part it kind of it follows what actually happened in history. So the books take a long time to produce because there's a lot of research that goes into first to get the period right. But when it works, it's great, and people seem to kind of respond to that. And in each of the Flintlock books, there's right at the back, there's some of the back matter that's in there. There's always a little kind of article on the true history that inspired the stories. So, for example, I've got the pirate character I've used in Flintlock is Shanti the Pirate Queen, who's a South Asian pirate, but the inspiration for her came from Ching Shi, who was a real pirate queen, and she was actually the most successful pirate that ever existed, and who happened to be female. She had a fleet of over 1,700 ships at the height of her powers. So in one of the books, there's a biography of her at the back. So when you've read the stories, but then you can read about the actual real incidents and the real people that inspired those stories. And I think that's important as well. They keep it linked to that history. I think the only kind of the blowback is that because I'm so obsessed with the period, I forget sometimes that other people aren't so obsessed. So I think I think where that's come to fore is the artists. I've been lucky in all the artists I've worked with on Flintlock. They're all brilliant. They're all really good artists. But there's a guy called Anthony Summy who drew Lady Flintlock in books 1 to 3. He's an absolute fabulous artist, real classical style. And I remember when he did the art for episode 2, he sent me through the pencils, and I had to ask him to redo a lot of the forest scenes, and the reason is because he'd drawn the wrong type of tree in the forest, because he'd drawn the type of tree that wasn't introduced into English forests until after the 18th century. So he had to redo the trees. Now, I know you could possibly say, well, no one would have noticed that, but I noticed it.
I was going to say, you would have noticed it.
But he was very good about it. So it's those kind of things where, that's the only thing with Flintlock. Sometimes I think it's a great project to do, and I'm having a blast doing it. But I think sometimes, I feel sorry for some of the artists because they have to get the period right. And I think for one or two, I mean, there's over the years, last couple of years, there's been a few artists that have kind of approached me about being involved with Flintlock, and we've had a conversation, but then they've backed away when they've realised that it's more than just drawing a few fight scenes, but that's good. But one of the nice things about it as well, I mean with Flintlock, I've had cosplayers, and that's amazing. That's blown my mind.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
When a couple of people come, a couple of women turn up at the shows, and they're dressed up as Lady Flintlock and that with their pistols, and that's just mind blowing. So there's been lots of nice things that have come out of it, but it's very much me doing my thing, and hopefully people are going to come along and enjoy the ride.
That's amazing. I can only imagine the feeling seeing people walk over in cosplay as your characters.
It's mind blowing. It really is. It's mind blowing.
What does they say? Imitation is the finest form of flattery. That's it. That is it. Cosplay it's that come to life, isn't it? So, what's next for Time Bomb? What books have you got coming up?
Well, this goes back to how strange this year is, really, because it was all set for 2020 to be quite a really busy year. I mean, last year we had a great year, and we were looking to capitalise on that. So we were going into 2020 expecting to release about 7 or 8 different books over the course of the year, and the global situation has kind of tempered that somewhat. So we've had to kind of reduce what we got coming out a little bit this year, and then hopefully things will start coming back to normal towards the end of this year and into next year. So I mean, we just released the another Dick Turpin book, which was the first Dick Turpin book I've done for a while. So that came out literally last month. So Dick Turpin and the Vengeful Shade. So it's Dick Turpin in a haunted monastery, basically. So that there's 56-page full color one shot. So that's come out, and that's been received well. Now we've got Flintlock book 5 is on the cards. Hopefully that will be out this year. We got the second issue of Brawler, which is nearly finished. We're just waiting for the last few pages of artwork to come in for that, and then that's pretty much good to go. We've got another volume of Bomb Scares, which is the horror anthology we do, and that's nearly finished as well. So that's on the cards as well. We've also got there's 4 other graphic novels that are currently in production, which are written and drawn by other people. So that's all chugging along. So lots of things are kind of moving along at pace. So even though the shows have kind of stopped, and because of the shows have stopped, it means we've kind of had to slow on our releases. The actual production of those books is still very much underway. So what it will hopefully mean is that when we can kind of ramp things up again, then we'll be able to release things relatively quickly, because all the work is still being done. So I think that's going to be a bit of a mixed blessing there, I think. And of course, we're always looking at stuff as well. So we get we're considering it's such a small little outfit, and I get a lot of submissions that come through, and I'll be perfectly honest, probably 95% of them are just not right for us at all. And of those remaining 5%, maybe 10% of those is something I might actually be interested in having a conversation about. So there's always kind of things that are coming in which I'm looking at and having chats with potential kind of creators about. But at the moment, the next thing I've got coming out, and this is actually a bit of a exclusive for you guys, so I don't think I've let anyone else know this. Is there was a black and white comic that came out in the early 2000s, I think. Well, 2007, 2008. Not long after I'd started, there was a comic came out by these 2 guys called Roger Gibson and Vincent Danks, and it went by the name of Harker, and it was a crime series. I don't know if either of you guys are familiar with it at all, but it was published black and white, and it was a bit like one of those. Imagine someone like Inspector Morse or something like that, but in a comic kind of environment, but a lot better. Yeah. And that was published, 12 issues they published. Then it was signed up by a big name publisher, who then the big name publisher didn't do anything with it. So basically it was, I've loved that comic for years. And I was able to get hold of Harker, and we're bringing Harker back, and we're getting it coloured, and so we got Vince and Roger on board for that. We're going to be bringing out the Harker series, reprinting what was gone before in full colour, but then more excitingly moving on to brand new stories featuring those characters. Now, anyone that knows of Harker, who remembered Harker, will probably be quite excited about that, because it was a great comic at the time. It was, it was the indie press comic that was winning loads of awards at the time, because it really was a fantastic piece of work. So we got that coming up as well over the next, so that would be hopefully be the next one coming out, where we reprint the original first 3 issues, but we've got it coloured, we remastered it, and the idea will be bringing out a new volume every 6 months, for the next 2.5 to 3 years. So starting off with the stuff that come out already, and then moving over to the brand new stuff. So quite excited to be working with Roger and Vince on that.
That's amazing. It's awesome to see that you've got so much stuff lined up as well. So okay, the world's come to a bit of a pause at the minute, but it's all still churning along in the background.
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, it's always kind of, it's not, things haven't stopped. They've just slowed down a bit, I think. Yeah. And I think that's the key thing. I mean, yeah, it's a shame that they're not doing the conventions, because I was averaging about 25 conventions a year. So wow. It's a big change not to be doing them. But the thing is, we're getting the books done, putting the books together, and hopefully when they are released, people will enjoy them and read them.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Just a couple last more quick questions. I just want to say, any advice you could give for upcoming writers, people that are thinking, I reckon I could do this. Like, any advice you'd give them, being someone, how was it you said just named yourself a veteran in the community?
Well, someone else named me a veteran. Yeah. I've got their name. I know where they live. We'll be having words. But I mean, it applies really. You said about writing, but it applies to artists as well, I think. And don't overextend. Don't start small. You can learn so much from doing a 4, 5, 6 page story than doing some multi-part mega epic. So hone your craft. Start small. I think that's a really important thing to be able to do. If you can tell a really good, satisfying story, or draw a great story in 4 or 5 pages, or even less, then you'll easily be able to do something larger. Because all the technique that you need, you'll use in a short story. So I think that's one thing that you need to do is just. Don't start too big. Don't give yourself too big a mountain to climb, because I think sometimes you can decide you want to embark on something great, but you'll never get to the end. And you need to have you need to be able to complete something and see it as a finished piece of work, and then move on to the next thing. The big mega epics, they'll still be waiting for you, but start small. I think that's a really important thing to do. I think as well, another thing is to. I mean, I talked about the community, the comics community, about being welcoming, and it really is. So another thing is embrace that community. Get to know the people within the community. Just to have conversations, Not everyone will want to be your best friend, yeah, but most people will quite happily have a conversation with you, or if you drop them a line through social media, they'll happily have a bit of a chat. Get to know the community. Okay, embrace the community. The community will embrace you back. There's lots of kind of people who've got a lot of knowledge and they're happy to share. And the other thing really is just enjoy it. I mean, and that's the thing, enjoy what you're doing. If you're not enjoying it, stop. Okay, don't beat yourself up over it. Just move on. But the idea is, as a creator, yes, you're creating some piece of work, and you might be putting all blood, sweat, and tears into it. But ultimately, you need to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's kind of pointless doing it. So I think that's really the other thing. And the only other thing as well is really, and this really applies to comics, is understand what comics are about. Now, what I mean by that is understand how comics work. In the same way, is that if you decided you were going to be a master baker, yeah, before you built your 15-tier wedding cake, you would spend some time learning how mixtures work together, how different flours work, how flavor balances and combinations can have an effect. Learn how comics work, because the way that comics work is very different to any other medium. So spend some time understanding the theory before you put it into practice. Now, I always recommend a book called Understanding Comics by a guy called Scott McCloud, which it's been reprinted a few times. I'm sure it's easily available on Amazon. It's a fantastic book because it tells you how comics work. There's a lot of things that go on in comics, and how they're read, and the way that the brain kind of takes them on board. And if you understand how that works, you can use those to kind of when you're creating comics yourself. So Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, read it, let it become your Bible, because you'll learn more from that book than you will from a whole host of other things, and it'll only improve the quality of the work which you yourself put out. I guess those would be my bits of advice, I suppose.
Wow. Steve, thank you so much for coming on. I love nothing more than speaking to someone who is so incredibly passionate about what they do. I absolutely love it. This whole chat might as well just been the Steve show. We barely got a word in edgeways, and that is not a bad thing, my friend. I love it so much, because there's nothing worse than asking someone a question like, "Yeah, it's great." I love it. I love all that passion. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting us on.
Before you get out of it, please plug social media, websites, shops, whatever you've got. Just let people know what they are.
Okay. Well, I guess the best one would be the website, which is timebombcomics.com. Nice and easy to remember, and it's got the online shop on there, so everything is available through the online shop. All the prices on the online store already include kind of postage, so there's no kind of add-ons put on there. We also then have a Time Bomb Comics page on Facebook. There's a Twitter account as well, which is Time Bomb. You can find us, and of course, I'm Steve Tanner. You can easily find me on social media. If anyone wants to link up with me personally, I've got no problem with that. And if you ever see me at a show, when shows start up, you can usually recognise me, because I'm the old guy in the really colourful jacket. That's probably the easiest way to describe it.
You got to stand out in a crowd, mate.
No, if you go to a convention and you say, "Oh, the guy in the jacket," yeah, they'll point you to me. They'll know. Okay, just come across and say hello. Because I said, it's always good to meet new people. It's always good to have a chat.
That's amazing. I did mean to ask you. Sorry. People that wanted to send their projects for you to have a look at, to consider, where would they send them to?
Again, the website would be the best place to start, because that's also got a submission guidelines on there. What I would say is read them. Yeah. And that sounds really odd thing to say, because the guidelines are really, really simple, really straightforward. But the amount of times we get the stuff through, and clearly they haven't followed the guidelines, and anything that comes through that hasn't followed the guidelines, we don't even look at. Yeah, we just dismiss it straight away. So follow really the guidelines there. You can submit then through the website to us. But I mean, I think the thing is, like with any kind of comics publisher, understand the kind of stuff they're doing first. Okay, so rather than just come blindly send stuff in, just make sure you're targeting the right kind of company. We don't do superheroes. Okay, so we're not interested in anything which is superheroes, and so understand a bit more what we do and make sure that you follow our guidelines, and we'll have a look at it and we'll come back to you.
Wonderful. Again, Steve, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for letting us take up so much of your time.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
True pleasure, true inspiration, Steve. Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Is this thing on?
Well, howdy doody, everybody.
This is Braden Berry from Say We Can Fly, founder of Stay Cozy Clothing, your one-stop shop for the coziest, most fashionable hoodies, t-shirts, and more.
Gosh, Mickey.
That's right, folks. And we're proud to say that we are now sponsoring
the Chronicles of Podcast. Ouch.
Hosted by Tom and Jamie.
Like, you can get 10% off, man. That's right, Shaggy. Just use the special code, The Chronicles, at checkout.
Oh, boy.